All
There we
right.
go.
June 14th, 2022, Gulli Bot Team Meeting. I moved the qualified immunity. I don't know if you looked at this before the meeting, but it was below the finalized 5-6 topic debates. But I kind of want to just dive into qualified immunity because we might learn some
Polish
stuff
before
in
we.
there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I pulled up the chart. And so kind of like we discussed, these top items will be the trade-offs. I think my scoring algorithm is not working. Because I would expect, and I don't know if it has to do with these
There's a lot fewer skepti below that first level response. I think that the 100% confidence is incorrect for what it's actually doing, though.
You mean these 100%?
Yeah, that beneath it.
Well, so there is a quirk where importance doesn't. In this situation, I wouldn't expect it to actually affect the score.
I'm kind of getting the sense that it's not affecting the number that we see, but it is affecting the calculation.
Yeah, but it really shouldn't. Because what this importance is saying is that this claim is more important than these other two. But if they're all at 100% confidence, and if there's no pros or cons affecting its confidence, then it doesn't matter. It would all be 100%. So normally when you have a whenever you do importance, it's saying it's more important than the other claims on it, its sibling claims. But so far we don't have any cons on any of these saying that they're not 100%. So 100%,
I have no idea.
100% would still be 100%. But I think one claim is over here. So this is a Gulli claim. So maybe this is why this one's not 100%. Which it would, so if this one's there, I'm reading this right, I'm not really familiar with this UI that much yet. Then yeah, that it has one kind of con to it. But it's 1 versus 3, and this one counts as 2 because it's labeled important. So it's 1 against 4. So a skepti at -43. But I guess the main thing, yeah, these claims, I don't see how it would be 100%. It would be 100 -22 -43 and 100, unless there's some things making the importance go down. On the cons. I don't actually see that. These are all confidence. Anyway, so I guess I'll need to go in and look and see if these numbers make sense or not.
Yeah, and I haven't had time to delve into the code yet at all, so I would have no idea yet.
Yeah, well, yeah, hopefully if we watch the explainer on how the scoring works, you wouldn't have to look at the code to see whether the scoring is correct. Right.
Yeah, but looking at the code, we'll see whether or not it's actually connecting the dots the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this one.
Yeah, because I recall that you weren't happy with the phrasing. I tried to phrase it in a way that was a little more specific about the occurrences that were happening out of it.
Well, I think that's a good idea. The one I was battering on yesterday after the call was that qualified immunity leads to rights violations or allows more rights violations. Because I guess what I'm concerned about unjust is that kind of falls into is also that kind of Venn diagram overlaps with make policing less effective, because the goal of policing is to apply justice, right?
I mean, not necessarily. The goal of QI specifically to protect the ability of police to act without concern about the justice of their actions. And there's
yeah, but I'm not talking about QI. I'm talking about just policing in general. One of the goals of policing is justice, right?
That's not entirely supported by current legal status, but in theory, it is meant to be, yes.
Well, I mean, that's one of society's goals for having police officers, is to have a more just society, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, wouldn't it causes more branding QI would minimize the frequency of rights violations also then directly apply under making policing more or less effective? Because presumably not violating rights is also a goal of police.
Well, that's why this one could also be phrased as to enforce the law, right? So enforcing the law, except for the laws that specifically talk about rights violations, you know, it's reducing the overlap between the two claims. Right now they overlap quite a bit, and we may not be able to get them completely unoverlapped, but making them specific enough that they're not overlapping would make the scoring a lot easier and more specific and understandable. But that's part of the problem with this, is that we're trying to stuff out.
Yeah, I'm not sure if all of the subclaims would still fit under the less effective one if we change it to what was your phrasing again?
Ending QI will make enforcing the law less effective rather than policing. Well, it's maybe, yeah, I don't know, maybe that's semantically the same. The more important change is to narrow this down to rights violations. But I don't know if that's helpful, because yeah, is that
I really
all the
don't
only
think
thing
it
people are
is.
concerned about or not?
If we try to narrow things down so much in that way, I think we're going to cut out a significant, if not even a majority proportion of people's interaction with this, because they'll see that we are explicitly excluding a large portion of what matters to them in discussing the issue in the first place.
Well, so I mean, those could go under a different section. We're teasing out where things are naturally grouped together. But if the two concerns overlap, then it's vague and people won't know which one to go into, and the scoring won't work.
Okay, so in theory, we could break them down into, I'm gonna spitball here, so it's gonna be a little scattered. Ending QI will make enforcing laws more difficult. Ending QI will make the work of policing less appealing. Nah, that'd be a sub one, but less appealing to candidates. I mean, that would be different than the difficulty of enforcing laws.
So actually, when did we have increasing costs at the top level in our last discussion, or did we say
We didn't. It will
remove
make it more
that
expensive
quote?
was something that I added specifically because of the conversation and shuffled things around because of it.
Where is so yeah, so I thought we had costs at the top level. Well, and the efficacy of law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well, costs
That
I
doesn't
had
make
phrased as ending QI will make policing more expensive.
Okay, so there's the costs.
And that's why it overlaps with that one claim, because it's talking both about there being a financial incentive and it's leading to more effective policing outcomes because they have an incentive to do better. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here because I realize that there might be a wider question to be asked that will clarify this. Are we wanting to more look at this like a say a structured Lincoln Douglas debate, something that has clear rules and formats for how things are going to be approached and discussed and defined? Or are we wanting to look at this as regular people interacting and disagreeing on something that will reflect the people who are reading these sites, because they look very different.
I mean, it's closer to Lincoln Douglas, but it's even not that. It's the actual logical debates. So it's more like a mathematical formula than it's not how people phrase it, because people don't think logically. And it's not how you would do it in a Lincoln Douglas debate, but it is in that way, in the fact that it's not really rules, except for the rules of logic. So, and the quotes are just to kind of know where we're doing things, but it's not how humans would debate it. It's more, what if you were going to write a program to make this decision, what are the logical statements that you would make?
Okay, then that would, I think, be directly at odds with previous
Yeah, a lot of the
philosophy.
goals are at odds and will be. It's always a balance and a prioritization.
Yeah, because if what I was to this point prioritizing was when we had said that or people who have an opinion on this would feel reasonably comfortable that they were fully represented within this.
Yeah, but that's not the top goal.
Okay,
It
that
first has to
prioritization
be
had not been clear.
you know, a logical breakdown of the things. But wherever we have the opportunity, we want to make sure that when they investigate it, it may not be completely obvious where their statement is, and that's where kind of the search comes in. So if they're like, oh, that's not in here, well, I could search for it, or we can create another explainer that says frequently asked questions, like does that. But in the chart itself, it has to be in logical form,
Mhm.
a mathematical logical form. That's the top priority. And it doesn't have to have anything to do with the actual quotes or what people say. So almost like I'm starting to wonder if it's almost like now that we kind of have a feeling and intuitive feel for the space, starting from the top and restarting fresh without any of the existing sentences is almost better, because I think part of it is trying to squeeze in everything and keeping it all in mind as opposed to thinking through the logic of the argument, going through and then seeing whether everything has a place. And if it doesn't, find out what was wrong with our logic.
Mhm.
So, like, one thought is, and this could be wrong, is that once we say NEQI will make policy more expensive, any things that talk about the effects of expensiveness can be taken out of this one, because the assumption is Indian qualified immunity will make less effective. In theory, that's saying other than expenses, because that is in that one over there. Because the
And why wouldn't it be the inverse, that anything that will make policing less or effective would be taken out of expense because it's included into that? It's neither more specific than the other. They're just focusing on different things that happen
well,
to
but if
be
you
intertwined in
put
some
any
sense.
one of them inside the other, uh, the no, I mean the fact that it costs more and the fact that it makes that cost makes it more and more. So this is saying ending QI will make policing more expensive, and the
Mhm.
assumption of that is that it'll end up making it less effective. So I mean, actually, maybe this whole thing belongs under here.
Well, that's where it was in the first place, and then I moved out because of our discussion last time.
Well, but that's why I changed it from less effective to less, you know, enforcing the law, which is not.
Yeah, then that's a
The
hard
negative
discussion too.
effect of that can be stored in either, but to having it in both would count twice as important.
I don't think we actually can have it. They'll enforce the law less often under this reasonably because QI specifically applies when they have broken the law, just in a way that they're protected from. So that seems directly at odds with the whole point of it. If they are not protected from breaking the law, then it would seem hard to say that ending it will make them, it will lead to the law being followed more often. I think I had a negative the wrong direction there.
Sorry, say that again.
So if we were changing it to ending QI will make police enforce the law less often, or will lead to the law being enforced less frequently. That would seem to be at odds with the fact that or qualified immunity specifically exists to protect police when they have broken the law.
Well, so they can break or not break the law when someone else is breaking a law. So those are two different law breaks. One is the police breaking the law, and one is the person breaking the law.
Would we want to view the police breaking the law as a different form of law violation than non-police breaking the law?
Well, I mean, that's the assumption, is that everything under here is talking about the laws that are not the police. And we could make that explicit, but it's not, it's when we talk about policing, we're talking about policing the citizens, not policing the police.
Yeah, and that does delve into a whole different issue then, which is both hard to gloss over and hard to include without it taking over.
I think what I'm seeing is that I might want to spend a couple hours working on this on my own and see how I would organize it.
That would definitely be helpful to have an overall structure to compare against. That does mean that we're doubling up on the work for this, but particularly this early on, I suppose that's not actually a
Yeah.
bad thing or unexpected.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's good. Yeah, because I really have to, when I propose a change, it ripples down through the whole thing. So you have to look at kind of the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I might find out it's impossible. Which would answer the whole thing. So yeah, let me try that separately. That'll probably save some time other than me just staring at you silently while I'm thinking through it. Unless you had any other questions about kind of how you did it or thoughts or observations when you were doing that.
Yeah, knowing that the priority isn't as much on representing the people who would be using the site as I thought, or at least that's not tiered as highly in priority, will definitely help structure it. But I also am starting to feel at this point like we're going back and forth between different priorities without them clearly being delineated in a way that's making me have to reverse work that I've done, which would come down to not having a clearly defined structure for how we are wanting to put this together, which is expected when it's new and we're figuring it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, where is? Have you gone into the Discord yet?
Yeah, I joined it. I haven't done much in it.
What I'm gonna pull up is my kind of design document, because it kind of mentions the or design brainstorm sheet. Yeah, so yeah, right. So yeah, so these are the goals of the that we want to, the information, the priority that we want the person to see it, but they're not concerned about the logical form, but we are. It says design goals.
Yeah, so the good feeling of being heard and understood was what I'd been
Yeah.
giving the most weight to, which I think is accurate to how it's been described to this point.
Yeah, I think I've been contradictory. Because that is really important, but it's not as important as the actual formula working, and the formula is dependent on it being in proper kind of logical
Yeah,
form.
I suppose I should also say we should be wary of assuming that we are capable of reducing things to a pure logical expression, given that that is often not a more accurate reflection of these situations and circumstances
So that's one of the
that are at
questions
hand.
the system. That's one of the questions what this experiment is supposed to find, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So that's why there's some wiggle room in the design. But the question is, can it be put in a close enough logical form to get a score that seems reasonable based on the evidence? And it'll never be perfect, but can it be sufficient? And that may be one of the things we find in this experiment, even when we go through these 5 things, is that we cannot find a way to organize these claims and break them and change them and rewrite them in such a way that the score comes out to mean what we think those claims mean, and and then it's still consumable by the average, consumable by humans. The average person might get tired of looking through it, but if they choose to, that it would make sense. So in that case, it could either be you just can't do it, but that's also why this isn't. It's like this has the concept of progressive formalization, right? So you can kind of add things in, and you don't have to keep going down. You just have to reach the shared assumptions. But yeah,
This
yeah. And we can
is
have claims
also
in 2 different places to when it breaks, but
Mhm.
we want to minimize that. Go ahead, sorry.
uh, this is also, if you're going to be focusing more on the logical construction of it, suggesting to me that at least preliminarily, that was not how the word worked, creating some sort of this is what we mean by this word, a definitions a table or something would be helpful to add or at least conceive of.
So meta-wise on the system level, or in here, like when we say qualified immunity, like in the debate itself?
I think for now it'd be meta-wise on the system level, but if we're going to try to structure it that logically, then it would be, I think, necessary to be able to say for specific words that could be ambiguous or mean different things to different people, this is the definition we are using.
So I do have a few of those just because they're used in the code. But I have a feeling that's not addressing your concern. Is there a word? Is it like the whole thing of saying logical form? Like, what the heck does that mean? Or
No, it's like if we are, I mean, just isn't a great example, but it's the one that comes to mind. Like, this is the definition that we are using for what qualifies as just or unjust.
so that would be on our debate by debate. I mean, all the debate
Yeah,
by justice would
it'd
be
be
in
on
there.
the debate. It'd be like a hover over pop up, but like
Yeah.
to
So
clarify,
the way I'd like to do that is when we feel it's necessary. Um, for now, I almost just want to put it in parentheses. I do later have, yeah, the design toward it would be an underline, but instead of taking you to the definition, although it might. It'd be convenient if you clicked on it, it would just pop up to that definition.
I was thinking a hover over. I guess if it's mobile, then that wouldn't work.
Yeah, or both. Yeah, hover on desktop and click on mobile. Yeah, kind of do that thing like Google Docs where you click on it and it pops up a little preview and then you can
A modal.
Yeah. So we can I think for now we can add those in just in parentheses. It'll clutter it up, but we can take it out. I mean, we could also, we don't have any place in the debate to, like, we could make another table with words and definitions by debate and stuff, but I kind of want to see if we just use parentheses for.
Okay. In that case, not a thing to worry about.
So we'll keep, so I added it in there. So if you need a reference, this is a mix between mapping priorities and UI priorities. So this isn't correct. I mean, it needs to be split up probably somewhere, but I'm just adding that in there so we know that from our data entry goals. I mean, it's still going to end up being a UX thing because they need to be able to understand it's in logical form and not conversation or chronological, or it's kind of a mix between the two. I don't know, but does that kind of help to have that there in the design goals?
Yeah, and I'm thinking that going forward, it'll probably be better when I am weighing a decision between different priorities to write down that that decision needed to be made and wasn't either was I thought was delineated and this is why, or hasn't been delineated yet.
Yeah, that might be good. And I think also when I sit down and try and do it, that'll be a more illuminating meeting because I'll have a fully fleshed out theory rather than ad hoc and you just having to point out all the problems with it as I go through it. Which is deeply uncomfortable. So I'll just make a note that we we just updated the priorities. I mean, really, we don't need these notes, but
Yeah, this also does or help for a stylistic choice to do as a more mechanical phrasing in a way, make it sound more robotic.
yeah. And hopefully people will be a little bit more accepting of kind of clunky phrasing because it's supposed to be a dumb little robot. Okay, so yeah, I'll go back and do an analysis, or try and do my own kind of grouping and think about. Let me make a note to document reasons. I mean, I'll have to explain it to you on the call, but I don't know. I guess I didn't even think about the 5 to 6 launch debate topics. Did you have any thoughts or?
None really that I didn't express when we were talking about them the last time.
I mean, so we can go ahead and probably just finalize these. I want to do the health costs and insurance, but I can't. I think that one's too unphrased.
I think that I
So
would,
we'll assume concealed carry.
yeah, I think the claim that we have now is or effective for where we're at. I'd want to start fleshing out some more of them rather than expand concealed carry too much right now, just so we can get
Yeah.
closer to having the 5 to work with.
Yeah.
I think I would rephrase, do US elections have a lot of fraud, to do US elections have a significant level of fraud?
That's good.
Significant, I think, is a more mechanical phrasing, because implying statistical significance.
Yeah. So that's one of the words that one of the things we'll probably define, like more than 0.05% or something like that, right? When we get to that, we can kind of decide what
Mhm.
that.
The alternative would be to phrase it as something like, does fraud play a deciding role in US elections?
Yeah, that's interesting, because then you take into account what's the spread of. Another way you could say it is, has fraud ever changed the results of an election within the United States?
Well, that would be a resounding
different.
yes, because of the stuff the South did to intimidate and kill after the Civil War and Reformation, or not Reformation, that forgetting the word, you know what I mean?
Wait, so which one?
Reconstruction, that's what I was looking for. So in the South, after the Civil War, initially there was a period where like Black people were starting to get elected into positions in politics, and there was a significant effort to intimidate, actively kill, and
Yeah, I guess
corrupt the
so.
process.
Well, that's interesting. What we might do is put a date limit on it, like within the last 100 years.
Maybe do current U.S. Or are any current U.S. elections decided by fraud?
Yeah, and then fraud in this case, we would want, that's one of the words where we'd want to define and say, not counting. I mean, like if when I say any, that actually makes it a fairly weak argument, because if they can find one example, but it is the key crux of that issue in that case. I'd almost want to do that. Plus, that's really kind of what everyone's arguing about.
And actually, no, there would be a current election that was decided by fraud. I think it was a Florida representative, it may have been state representative, where the GOP specifically paid somebody with an identical name to the primary Democratic challenger to also apply for the ballots, just so enough people would vote for a person with the same name but was the wrong candidate to decide the election. And they did end up getting enough votes to change the outcome of the election.
So the question is, what do we mean by fraud? Because I think when people are saying stop the steal for the election, I mean, the thing that we're arguing about is, we're using the word fraud, but I think specifically it's,
Fraud does have a legal definition.
well, yeah, but that's not what people mean when they say it. When they say that the 2020 election was stolen, or the 20 what was it? Yeah, 2020 election was stolen from Trump. they're not saying that, it's one of those things in there, but they're very specifically, there's specific tactics that they're claiming were used and that they have in mind, and they wouldn't count, killing the opponent. That's not kind of what they're talking about. They're talking about systemic problems within the voting system. Really what it comes down to is we're talking about, it really comes down to like photo IDs.
And I think the more common visualization of the election being stolen is people filling out fake ballots.
Yes, right. So that's what I'm thinking is that the definition of fraud in this specific issue is invalid ballots. And that's why they want the photo IDs, right? So, and having to go in person and not by mail. A lot of them really want it because they know they would lose in a fair election, but that's what they're saying when they say fraud or was stolen. They're saying invalid votes.
I'm going to push back on this because I don't think a lot of them actually have an underlying logical reason for that. The argument itself is fundamentally emotional. It's why so many people believe Trump when he said that he won the popular votes in 2016. There is no logical basis for that. There's none. It is because they do not feel that he should have lost it. Therefore, they will believe that without needing a basis for it.
Well, there's no evidence, but there is logic. Does that make sense? So they're saying that when they're saying it was stolen, they're saying that someone mucked with the numbers, basically.
It's backfilling, though. They've reached the conclusion and then are applying.
Well, it's explaining their. I know that they're not being logical in coming to that conclusion, but when they came to that conclusion, there was a triggering event that caused them to have that emotional reaction. And so we look back at what's the triggering event, and if we're not specific enough, then the debate kind of is focusing on the wrong thing. We got to make sure that the emotional trigger is what they would recognize as the emotional trigger. So if we said, there hasn't been any fraud because, pick another part of fraud. If it's not the triggering event.
Yeah, well, we should also be cognizant, if we're picking this one, that every bit of evidence we're going to have is going to show that it's incredibly rare, and unless you're including things like paying the fake candidates, almost always entirely irrelevant.
Well,
this is going to be very one-sided arguments unless we are trying to account for the emotional attachment people have to it, which I don't think we should, but we need to be aware that that is the source. There's going to be a heavy imbalance between structuring this mechanically, finding the reasons, putting them together, and coming to a conclusion, and the ratio of feelings people have towards it. It won't feel like it represents a significant number of people who are reading this because they just don't have a mechanical basis behind it that can be structured in a way that will work.
Well, when I say feel heard, what I want to see is that the triggering events they have in their mind that made them come to that conclusion, other than just being told, or all the possible triggering events for that, are accounted for in the debate. So like in Carrollton, we had someone arrested because he was creating fake mail-in ballots. So when you talk to someone who thinks that the debates are that there's fraud, significant fraud in our elections, they have like a list of 5 or 6 of these that they saw in news articles. So we need to make sure those are included and are either debunked or shown to not have an effect on the outcomes, right? But we can't just do studies. We do have to handle like every time someone either lied or said something that feels like it should have an effect, and then show why it doesn't have an effect. That makes sense?
Yeah, looking this up, and there's a significant lack of information in this article.
What, on the one in the
Carrollton.
local area one? Yeah, I think he was arrested.
Yeah, he was arrested.
But yeah, whether it actually had an effect on the thing. But then
It does.
also, we also got to think about, well, in their mind, the fact that it arrested implies that other people are out there doing this and probably not getting caught. So we also have to kind of take that into effect. We can't just say he was arrested and thus this one didn't. Well, we could, but it would be clearer to say, even if he had succeeded, it wouldn't have been sufficient, or to say, yeah, since this person was caught, we can, we're not going to do the fallacy, the survivor's fallacy, and we're going to have other option. We'd have to also consider the fact that there may be people who were trying to do this that didn't get caught, and what's the potential effect of those, which some of the studies do, I think, take that into account. So we would then show a study that did that analysis and included it. What I think, so let's just say we're still kind of discussing the phrasing on that. But although on any of these, we could choose to change the phrasing during the debate. But these are the ones that we're kind of loosey-goosey on. I want to think more about the homeless one. But in general, I think this is a good list.
Yeah, it's at least specific enough that it can start being built up without feeling that is undefined what I'm looking for.
Cool. Okay, do you feel like you have enough work before our next meeting?
Definitely.
Okay.
Also, I'm going to be out from a Friday or evening or afternoon until mid Monday. So I will be able to make the Friday morning meeting, but I won't actually have any time, or at least not much time to work before the Tuesday meeting. So
That's good. Thanks for letting me know. That's good to know. I was thinking I do want to schedule some time to talk about user experience, and I want to include Max. So what I might just do is see if Max is available for our next Tuesday meeting, and then there won't be any expectations of you to have any work done between Friday and Monday.
yeah, it would mostly mean that this coming Friday meeting wouldn't be that valuable to hold, since I wouldn't be doing anything until the next meeting anyway.
Well, what I'd like to do is get your opinion on my reorganization,
Oh, yeah, we totally could do that.
because
That way it just
that's
gives you
all
time to
kind
reflect
of
on it.
debating and discussion and brainstorming. So that'll be a value. But yeah, there won't be an expectation. You won't be assigned any tasks that can't wait beyond the next week meeting. You might need to remind me of that on Friday. I'll try to
Fair.
make a note. All right. Well, I had another meeting schedule, but I think we're in a good place. You got work. We'll meet on Monday. We'll probably discuss. So on Friday, we'll discuss my organization and claims, and we might shut down the whole project if I can't figure it out. Or we'll have you bounce it against you and see if you can poke any holes in it. And then on Monday, if Max is available, we'll do some UX design stuff. Cool. Any other concerns or ideas?
No, I think we've covered it for the moment.
Great. All right. Well, chat with me in the Discord if you need anything.
Yeah, will do.